other relationships might some of Starmer's mates and his inner clique have with people who really we should be questioning? Because I don't think this stops with Mandelson, and I don't think this was a mistake with Mandelson, because it is so clear to anybody with even an iota of common sense that Mandelson is nuclear waste when it comes to political baggage and totally unsuitable for the most sensitive diplomatic appointment that you can imagine. This isn't just a lack of judgment, is it? I mean, really, is he that idiotic? Is he really that? I mean, if he is that stupid, he shouldn't be Prime Minister. But it's begging further questions. The more questions that seem to be answered, the more questions then appear. And I don't know. I just feel like the net is closing in. Shall we get a point of view from Reform UK on all of this? We're joined now by Alex Wilson, London Assembly member. I mean, it's astonishing, isn't it, that Mandelson, who is almost a cartoon villain in UK folklore, politically speaking, that when he was made US ambassador, I think some of us were like, really? I mean, the outcome of all of this was inevitable, as night follows day. Why? Why was he appointed?
Good morning, Alex. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This story is becoming increasingly murky the more that gets looked into it. And look, I'm all in favour of giving people second chances in life. But Mandelson, I think, has exhausted every single opportunity to have those second chances. He was already sacked twice during the Blair government and that era. So for him to be put forward as a candidate for this role in the first place raises huge questions about Starmer's judgment. And that's even before we know what we now know about his relationship with Epstein, and the fact that relationship continued after Epstein was already charged and convicted of some fairly horrific offences, and yet that relationship carried on, and he called him his best pal. It's absolutely staggering, and what's equally staggering is that, as you said in the intro there, Mandelson didn't seem to think that he had to resign this time. He actually had to be physically sacked, removed from that job after all this had come to light. I mean, we've talked before about how shambolic this government has become, and how quickly it's become a complete farce. And that's, in itself, is quite surprising that there's been no honeymoon. The wheels have come off far, far quicker than usually come off a new government. We've had over a dozen resignations of various ministers and positions since Starmer became Prime Minister, and this is just the latest. I'm sure it won't be the last, because there's something clearly wrong going on at the heart of this government, the way people are appointed to positions and the way people are carrying out those roles that they've been given.
I think
it's absolutely staggering.
I think if I was going to render this down to the obvious, I always think Occam's razor is the best way of going about things. I think basically the Labour Party are a little cabal of mates who are all sort of, being long connected politically, probably connected via the mysterious Fabian Society. I love talking about that. But I think it's just a case of it's jobs for the boys. They're all sort of mutually back-scratching and giving each other key positions. They probably know where each other's bodies are buried. But also I do think that among the group of people now who seem to be in charge of the Labour Party, we shouldn't underestimate how radically left-wing some of them are. And I think about this in the context of the state visit next week, and what on earth the Republican Party are going to make of all of this. I mean, in some respects, it sounds a dreadful thing to say, but for Sir Keir Starmer, this isn't going to be at the forefront of the minds of the Republican Party, given the awful, tragic events that have unfolded over in America in recent days. But if that hadn't come to pass, then I would imagine they might be a little bit more alive to some of the dangerous rhetoric that's used by politicians such as David Lammy, who's now the deputy leader, who of course was the foreign minister. The sort of demonisation and hyperbole that Donald Trump himself called out the other day. They might be deeply concerned about the fact that this was an appointment to the position of US ambassador, and how that affects the special relationship. And I'm thinking here, this state visit is going to be interesting, right? This was supposed to be the sort of big grand gesture. Out comes the invitation from the lapel. I love you. Isn't it remarkable? People talk about how brilliant it is that Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have this fantastic relationship. And I kind of think, Donald, has no one told you what he's like? No one told you the sort of things he says and does. You're not noticed. I do wonder how this is going to impact this state visit, which is supposed to be this sort of grand gesture of unity. And I also wonder what else is going to come to pass. I mean, has someone sat there and gone, do you know what, we probably ought to find a prison cell and put Khan in it for a few days so he can't open his big bazoo and make things worse?
This clearly is going to cast a very long shadow over that state visit. You're absolutely right. Having the state visit was supposed to be a really positive, strong way of showing the crucial nature of the relationship between the United States and ourselves, the enduring relationship that has delivered so much for the world since the Second World War, and through the security of NATO. But with all the global issues happening in the world at the moment, we need that relationship to be stronger than ever. And to have a situation where we have to result in sacking the ambassador to our biggest ally, it's catastrophic, I think. Let's hope we can get things back on track, because it's so important, regardless of the personalities involved. It's so important that our two countries do work together as we face all these huge global crises, obviously Ukraine, the Middle East, and we've got to get back to business. But back to the sort of question of Mandelson being appointed in the first place. Very, very curious appointment. Lots of other people could have taken that job. It could have been a career diplomat. Why does it have to be a political appointee in the first place?
Out of all the human beings on Earth, they pick the worst man for the job quite deliberately, even ignoring the advice of intelligence agencies. I want to bring it back to...
Well, that one makes it all the more demonstrative of a complete lack of judgment by Starmer. If he was warned that this was likely to come out, or something along these lines was likely to come out, then why on earth was that warning ignored? Why on earth did they persist with that appointment? What is it? What goods does Mandelson have over Starmer that means that he had to be appointed?
Now you're on my page. Now you're on my page. I want to bring it back to London, because you sit in the London Assembly. Of course, the state visit is centred around London. And I think back to the last time President Trump 1.0, when that state visit happened, and the London mayor almost gleefully rejoicing when that big inflatable balloon of Donald Trump as a big orange baby was floated above Parliament. And it'd be interesting actually to scratch into the archives and remind ourselves of the sort of things that Sadiq Khan has said about the London mayor and the sort of things he did during that last state visit. And as a man who probably has to share more oxygen with him than the rest of us, I wonder actually whether Sadiq Khan's been told to be on good behaviour this time round. Are there any sort of inklings that things are going to get a little bit embarrassing when it comes to the London mayor from things he might have been saying or doing in the London Assembly?
Well, last time it was just so childish, wasn't it? That blimp that was floated, and look, everyone has a right to protest and take a different view about whether you support particular political viewpoints and particular political individuals. But when you have somebody who is the leader of your strongest ally and effectively the leader of the free world coming to your city, coming to your country, you should welcome them with open arms and be mature, be sensible. Yes, if you have a disagreement, you express that in private. But fundamentally, London is going to be showcased to the world and showcased to our strongest ally, and we need to treat that with respect.
Do you reckon they're going to invite Sadiq Khan along to all the stuff? The glad handing, the photo ceremonies, the lecterns, the sort of pomp and ceremony. Do you think Sadiq Khan's going to be part of all of that as London Mayor, as you would expect in terms of protocol he should be? Or do you think it's a case of blimmin' it, we're going to have to send him on his annual leave for a while?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But we know that Ed Davies turned down the invitation, so perhaps Sadiq will do the same. But who knows?
Oh, it's all right. Ed Davies got a jet ski to go on, no doubt.
Well, true. It's a good job, though, that the visit wasn't this week when we had the catastrophic tube strike, which made life incredibly difficult for ordinary Londoners trying to get to work, trying to get around. Cost of estimated £230 million to the economy, and that's a strike that Khan could have done something about that. And he chose not to. He chose not to trigger the provisions of the Minimum Service Levels Act that could have guaranteed some level of operation on the tube lines. He chose not to do that because he's in the pocket of the unions, just like the Labour Party nationally. No,
do you know what? It's a very important point, and I don't think enough has been made of that. The London Mayor could have made sure the tubes ran this week, even if it was a minimum service. He had that power. And also I think it's interesting to point out as well that the last time there was going to be a full network strike in 2023, it was revealed much later that Khan had capitulated to the unions at the 11th hour and agreed to a pay rise, and it later was exposed that the cost of that pay rise to TfL staff amounted to £30 million. And then it's also worth pointing out that if we simply stopped fare evaders on the tube, That's £100 million. So perhaps there needs to be more questions
At least.
asked.
I mean, the figures that TfL give for fare evasion, I think, are a massive underestimate. They're not recording it properly. But yeah, somewhere in the region of 100 to 130 million is what they are quoting. So perhaps if the staff that were supposed to be manning the gates actually did their job, then maybe there would be some more money for higher pay rise. Who knows?
Exactly. My point exactly. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show. Alex Wilson, London Assembly member for Reform UK.